The sharp crack of the gavel silences the courtroom. Officer Ethan Stone's pulse races not for himself, but for the terrified little girl clutching his hand. Her mother is seconds away from a death sentence for a crime she didn't commit, and no one can stop it. No one except a loyal German shepherd stepping forward with a small box in his jaws. A box that could blow this case wide open. But as the judge's hand hovers over it, one truth becomes clear. What's inside won't just save a life. It could expose a danger far bigger than anyone imagined. The sharp crack of the gavel echoed through the courtroom, marking the conclusion of the trial. A bead of sweat slid down Officer Ethan Stone's neck, his pulse quickening as his eyes shifted to the small girl at his side. Emily, no more than 4 years old, seemed to carry the weight of the world on her tiny frame. She clung to him tightly, her wide, fearful eyes betraying the truth she already understood. Her mother, Sarah, was moments away from receiving a death sentence. And not for a crime she had committed, but for one she hadn't. Then, something shifted, on almost imperceptible change that only Kota, Ethan's steadfast German shepherd, appeared to sense. The dog stood motionless, every muscle taut, ears erect, eyes sharp. Clenched gently between his jaws was a small, unassuming box. A box no one, not even Serenu, existed. Within it lay the truth, the single piece of evidence that could shatter the case against her. The murmur of hushed conversations filled the courtroom as Ethan guided Emily forward, his mind racing. This was their final chance. No one, not the judge, the prosecutor, nor Sarah herself, knew the full story. As his grip tightened on the box, Ethan understood that this wasn't just a matter of mistaken identity. It was something deeper, more dangerous. If they didn't act quickly, Emily's mother would be lost forever. The judge raised the gavel once more, ready to bring the trial to its grim conclusion. Then Kota moved. With deliberate steps, he advanced toward the bench, his gaze locked on the judge, his presence cutting through the tension like a blade. Reaching the desk, he lowered the box onto its polished surface. The room went still, all eyes drawn to the dog. Sensing the gravity of the moment, though few understood it, the judge's voice broke the silence, sharp, but laced with uncertainty. "What is this?" Before anyone could answer, Ethan stepped forward, resting a steady hand on Kota's back. "This contains everything you need to know," he said, his voice calm yet urgent. "It's the truth." A ripple of doubt and disbelief moved through the room. Even the prosecutor's expression twisted into open disdain. But Kota remained still, his loyalty unwavering. His presence alone challenging the doubt that filled the air. Emily's small hand pressed into his fur as she stood beside him, sensing if not fully understanding that something monumental had just happened. The judge, his authority momentarily overshadowed by uncertainty, studied the box as if it held something impossible. Inside was a stack of papers, and within those pages lay the real story, one that could expose the true perpetrator behind the crime Sarah had been accused of. "Absurd," the prosecutor muttered from the back, but his words carried little weight against the charged stillness of the room. The trial wasn't over. Not yet. Not until the contents of that box came to light. Time felt suspended as the judge hesitated. The entire courtroom holding its collective breath. Kota stood firm, the unsung hero at the center of it all, his silent act carrying the weight of salvation. Emily's heart pounded as she looked up at him, hope flickering in her chest for the first time that day. Her mother would not die, not if Kota could help it. Slowly, the judge reached for the box. Each second stretched unbearably long, until, finally, with a quiet exhale, he opened it. Inside, a series of documents told a story no one had anticipated. As the judge turned page after page, his expression hardened. The truth had finally begun to surface. Inside the box were photographs, notes, and official records exposing the real criminal responsible for the charges against Sarah. The images were unmistakable, clear shots of a person everyone in the room had once trusted. Fingerprints, matching evidence, and irrefutable proof filled the files. "This can't be real," the judge murmured, his voice barely audible. His gaze flicked from the papers to Sarah, then to the prosecutor, whose composure was rapidly unraveling. A sheen of sweat gathered on his brow, and his earlier confidence was slipping away with every document revealed. Ethan stepped forward, his expressions set with determination. "This is the truth," he said firmly. "The real perpetrator has been hiding in plain sight, controlling events from the shadows." Sarah was framed, and now, thanks to Kota, the truth is here. The prosecutor tried to fight back. "This is absurd. None of this matters, it's irrelevant," he barked. But the strain in his voice betrayed his desperation. It was already too late. The evidence spoke for itself. The judge's hands trembled slightly as he looked down at the documents again, processing the weight of what lay before him. No one had expected this. No one had even thought to search in this direction. "Your Honor," Ethan said again, his tone steady but resolute, "the only thing that matters now is that Sarah is innocent. The proof is right there. It's time justice was served." The courtroom fell into a heavy silence. Even the prosecutor seemed to know the fight was over. At last, the judge lifted his head. His voice, though soft, carried absolute authority. "This court has made a mistake. The charges against Sarah Lyell will be dropped immediately." A wave of relief swept over Sarah. She sank to her knees, embracing Emily, tears streaming freely. Emily held tight to Kota's fur, not fully understanding every detail, but certain of one thing: her mother was safe. The air filled with a blend of shock, disbelief, and quiet joy. Kota stood beside Ethan and Emily, his task completed. His loyalty had uncovered the truth and saved a life, and for that, he needed no thanks. His tail wagged faintly in acknowledgement when Sarah looked down at him and whispered, voice trembling, "I can never repay you for what you've done." The judge bent over his desk, signing the papers that would officially clear Sarah's name. Kota turned toward the exit, pausing for just a moment before moving forward. Justice had been delivered. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting a golden glow over the town. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the air seemed lighter. The weight of injustice lifted. Kota walked at Sarah and Emily's side, his mission complete, but deep down, he knew he would be ready if called upon. Again, the courthouse, once a place of dread, now held the memory of a case turned upside down by truth. Sarah still felt the lingering shock, her tears drying, even as disbelief swirled inside her. She clung to Emily, the daughter who had shown such quiet courage through it all. For so long, Sarah had faced the fight alone. Now, the nightmare was over, at least for now. Beside them, the German shepherd sat calmly, his brown eyes scanning the room with quiet vigilance. He understood that his role as protector wasn't finished. He would remain by their side as long as they needed him. Sarah glanced down at Emily, who now wore a faint smile, her head resting against her mother's side. The little girl's fingers curled into Kota's fur, and for the first time in days, Sarah let herself relax, whispering softly, "We're safe now, sweetheart. You and me." The judge, still clearly shaken by the revelations, cleared his throat. His voice was quieter now. "This court will conduct a further review of the case, but for now, it is clear that Sarah Lyell is innocent of the charges brought against her. The charges will be formally dismissed. This is a victory for truth." For Sarah, it felt as though the spinning world had finally slowed. She had been so consumed by fear and uncertainty that she had nearly forgotten what hope felt like. But now, the truth was out, the lies destroyed, and a chance to rebuild lay ahead. Still, one lingering thought refused to fade: the fear that someone, somewhere, might try again to silence her and Emily. She had witnessed just how far the truth criminal had gone, pulling strings and twisting the truth to control everyone in their path. This wasn't finished, not until she knew they were truly safe. Ethan Stone, the officer who had stood beside Sarah from the very beginning, seemed to understand exactly what she was thinking. He stepped closer, his voice calm yet resolute. "You're safe now, Sarah. Kota and I will make sure no one ever threatens you again. We'll be with you every step of the way." Sarah nodded, though her chest felt heavy. What had happened to her and to Emily was not something that could simply be erased. The pain, the betrayal, the constant fear. Those wounds would take time to heal, but holding her daughter close in her arms made the rest fade into the background. The sudden creak of the courtroom doors pulled her from her thoughts. A figure stepped inside, and Sarah's pulse spiked. She knew him instantly, the prosecutor who had fought so hard to have her convicted. The man who had believed the lies. The man who had tried to ruin her life. He was walking toward them now, his face hard, his steps measured. But this time there was no swagger in his stride, no gleam of arrogance in his eyes. What she saw instead was fear. He stopped in front of her, and for the first time, his expression faltered. This was no longer the confident man she remembered. This was someone who had just realized how disastrously wrong he had been, how wrong they had all been. The truth had slammed into him, and there was no escaping it. I didn't know, he stammered, his voice shaking. I didn't know who I was dealing with. Sarah straightened, her voice steady and strong. You didn't want to know. You were too busy pushing a false story. My daughter and I were victims of your lies. The prosecutor flinched but said nothing. There were no words that could undo the harm. No apology could reverse what he had done. He had been part of something broken, and all he had left now was regret. Just go, Sarah said firmly. Leave us alone. Without a word, he turned and walked away. Sarah watched him go, but there was no satisfaction in the moment. Justice had been served, but the cost had been immense. The damage could never truly be undone. Kota, sensing her change in mood, nudged her hand gently. His warm eyes held an understanding that didn't need words. She scratched behind his ears, a faint smile forming. Their bond was silent but unshakable. He had given everything for her, and for Emily. He had been their shield when no one else could. It's over, Sarah whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. We're going to be okay now. Ethan stepped closer, resting a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We're not going anywhere. You've got people who care about you, and you've got Kota. You're not alone. For the first time in what felt like forever, Sarah believed him. The fear that had clung to her for so long was loosening its grip, replaced by a fragile but growing hope. The road ahead would not be easy, but with Emily and Kota beside her, she felt ready to face it. Together, the small family walked out of the courtroom into the bright sunlight. The golden light spilled across everything it touched, carrying a quiet promise that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The journey had been long, filled with pain and loss, but it had led them here, a place of justice and a second chance. Kota trotted happily at their side, his tail swaying gently. The ever-faithful guardian who would never stop protecting them. Sarah knew the healing had only just begun, but she also knew one thing for certain with Kota and Emily in her life. Nothing could ever truly break her again. 2 weeks passed after the trial. Yet Sarah still felt as though she were in a dream. She hadn't quite woken from the echoes of the gavels. Strike the sound that had once shattered her world were still sharp in her mind. But now there was a new, unfamiliar weight to carry. Peace, it wasn't unwelcome, just strange. After living for so long in fear and turmoil, the idea that the danger was over didn't quite feel real. She stood on the porch of her modest home, hands resting on the railing, gazing out toward the horizon. The world seemed still and quiet, but inside her, the storm of emotions remained. Her innocence had been doubted, her role as a mother attacked, all for nothing, and yet, she was still here. Still standing. The sound of soft paws against the wooden floor pulled her back to the present. Kota was, as always, by her side. His presence grounded her, a living reminder of the truth he had helped bring to light. Thank you, she murmured, unsure if he could understand, but knowing in her heart that he did. Kota turned his head toward her, his eyes warm and knowing, before nudging her hand. She smiled and scratched behind his ears. Through all the pain, it was him and Emily who had given her the strength to keep going. Just then, Emily burst out of the house, her small frame bouncing with energy. The smile on her face, bright and unguarded, had been gone for far too long. Sarah's heart ached at the sight, but it was a good ache. The past would always be with her, but for the first time, she believed the future could hold something better. "Mum. Kota's ready to play," Emily called, her voice ringing with joy. Sarah's lips curved into a genuine smile. She watched Emily grab a tennis ball and toss it. Kota sprinted after it with the unrestrained joy of a dog who knew he had done something good. The sight of them together brought a calm Sarah hadn't felt in years. They were safe, they were together. Then her peace faltered. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway made her freeze. Her heart pounded. Could it be him? The man whose lies had almost destroyed everything. The manipulator who had nearly taken everything from them. Slowly, Sarah turned toward the sound, her pulse quickening. The slam of a car door broke the stillness. A tall, weathered man stepped out, moving with a quiet authority that immediately set Sarah on edge. She narrowed her eyes, trying to place him, but his face was unfamiliar. Before she could say a word, he approached, his movements unhurried but deliberate. His gaze was steady, sharp, as if weighing every detail about her. "Sarah Lyle." His voice was low, rough around the edges. She gave a cautious nod, her stomach twisting. "Who are you?" "My name's Mark Jensen. I'm the one who uncovered the truth about your case." Sarah's breath caught. Her mind scrambled to make sense of his words. I don't understand." "What truth?" "It's over. The charges are gone. I'm free." Jensen inclined his head, but there was something in his expression that kept her guard up. "Not completely. There's still a lot that hasn't been brought to light. The person who set you up, the one who orchestrated all of this, is still out there. And he's more dangerous than you realize." A shiver ran down her spine. "What are you talking about?" Glancing over his shoulder, as if to make sure no one was listening, Jensen lowered his voice. "I worked on the team that dug into your case files. We thought we'd uncovered everything, but the truth is bigger, messier. The man who framed you is still part of a criminal network that's been operating in this town for years. Now that they know you're innocent, they see you as a problem, and they're coming for you." Sarah felt the ground slip away beneath her. She had endured the trial, the humiliation, the betrayal. She had survived it all, believing she was finally free. But now, a new and darker threat loomed. "What do I do?" Her voice was barely audible, laced with fear. "Stay calm. You're not on your own," Jensen said firmly. "Kota's done his job. Now it's our turn to keep you safe." Her mouth opened, but no words came. The same icy fear from the trial crept back into her chest, only now it was tangled with uncertainty. Was she truly free or still caught in the same web? Before she could answer, Ethan Stone's truck pulled into the driveway. He climbed out, his eyes instantly scanning the scene. One look at Sarah's face was enough to tell him something was wrong. "Everything okay, Ethan?" asked. His tone guarded. Jensen turned toward him with a short nod. "It's more complicated than you think. We've been digging deeper, and we've found something big. Someone's still out there and they're not finished." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Sarah, we'll take care of this. Kota will be with you every step of the way. You've been through enough, and I'm not letting anyone hurt you or Emily again." Fear and doubt pressed down on Sarah. But as she looked from Ethan to Kota now, sitting faithfully beside Emily, something shifted inside her. She wasn't alone, she wasn't powerless. Whatever came next, she had people willing to fight for her. Ethan's voice broke the silence. "We'll handle this together. Kota's already proven himself. Now, it's our turn." Sarah nodded, the weight of what lay ahead heavy on her heart, but with a fragile ember of hope burning beneath it. This wasn't the end, but she was ready to face it with Ethan, and with her own strength. The breeze rustled through the trees as she realized that while the past would never fully disappear, she was free in ways that mattered most. The truth was out. It was time to rebuild. As the sun slipped toward the horizon, a rare sense of peace settled over her. The next few days blurred together. One thing was certain, Her life no longer belonged solely to her. It hadn't since Emily was born, but now, with danger still shadowing them, every moment felt sharper, more urgent. Ethan stayed close. Kota never left her side, both offering the reassurance she needed. Yet Sarah couldn't shake the sensation that time was running short. Emily, blissfully unaware, played in the yard as if nothing had changed, tossing the tennis ball for Kota, her laughter bright against the growing tension. That innocence almost brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Standing at the window, she scanned their quiet neighborhood. It was the kind of life she'd once taken for granted: a safe home, simple days, a future untouched by fear. All she had ever wanted was to be a normal mother, to raise her daughter in a world where scraped knees and bad grades were the worst of it. But that world was gone. And what remained was darker, something she couldn't control, no matter how desperately she wished she could. The phone's sudden ring shattered her train of thought. Sarah jumped, her pulse quickening, before she reached for the receiver. A deep, steady voice came through the line. "Sarah, it's Ethan. You need to get ready." Her stomach tightened. "What's going on?" "We've got new information," he said. "A lead on the man behind everything, the one who framed you, and he's close. Too close." A cold shiver ran through her. "What do we do?" "Get Emily, pack what you can, and don't look back. We're getting you out of there right now." Panic gripped her chest. It was all happening too quickly. They had only just begun to rebuild, to feel some sense of safety. But deep down, she knew there was no other option. It wasn't only her life at risk, it was Emily's as well. Her eyes darted to the window. Outside, Emily ran toward her with outstretched arms, carefree and innocent. The sight filled Sarah with both warmth and dread. She had to protect that innocence. She had to protect her daughter. With trembling hands, Sarah hung up and rushed into the bedroom. She yanked open drawers, grabbing clothes at random, trying to steady her breath, but the air felt tight, as though the walls were closing in. Then came Kota's bark, sharp, insistent. Sarah froze, heart pounding. Was it them? Had they found her? Tires screeched on gravel outside, followed by the slam of a car door. "This is it," she thought. "Mum," Emily's voice called from the yard. "Is something wrong?" Sarah didn't answer. She flung open the door. Kota stood rigid, ears pricked, gaze locked on a car pulling up too close to the house. Her stomach sank. There was no escape. She glanced at Emily, too young to grasp the danger, and pulled her close, feeling the small warmth of her daughter's body against her chest. For that moment, nothing else mattered, not who was coming, not what would happen next. The front door burst open. Ethan's voice cut through the tension. Urgent. "Move, Sarah. We don't have much time." She handed Emily to him without hesitation, and followed. Kota was right behind them, his protective instincts in full force. They ran to a waiting truck, climbed in, and sped away. As the house shrank in the distance, Sarah felt a hollow ache, the loss of the life they'd fought to rebuild. But there was no turning back. Ethan's voice was steady as he drove. "We'll find him, Sarah. We'll stop him. He won't hurt you again." But doubt lingered. What if they couldn't track him down? What if they were just fleeing a shadow that would never stop chasing them? She pushed the fear down. She needed to be strong for Emily, for Kota, who now rested his head in her lap, as if he understood everything. He always did. "I'm scared, Ethan," she whispered. "I know," he said softly. "But you're not alone. We'll get through this. We'll make him pay for what he's done." Sarah nodded, unsure if she believed it. Life had turned into a deadly game of hide-and-seek. But for the first time in days, a small spark of hope flickered inside her. Maybe they couldn't erase the past, but they could fight for what lay ahead. The truck sped on, the wind roaring past, yet Sarah barely noticed. Her focus was on Emily. The hours ahead would be critical. They were heading to a place only Ethan and Kota knew, a safe spot where they could plan their next move. She knew their enemy wouldn't stop easily. He had power, influence, and allies. But he lacked the one thing that might defeat him: love. And Sarah would never stop fighting for The family she still had, the road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear, she wasn't running anymore. They would face him, and no matter what happened, she and Emily would survive, dash together. The days after their escape blurred into a haze of constant travel and gnawing uncertainty. They moved from place to place, never staying long. Settling down wasn't safe yet. The man who had ruined everything still lingered in the shadows, close enough to haunt her thoughts. Even in moments of calm, Sarah's heart raced. Ethan and Coda were with her every step, their presence a steady reminder she wasn't alone. Yet the fear never fully released its grip. This life, always moving, always looking over her shoulder, wasn't something she'd ever imagined, but she had no choice. For Emily, for Coda, for herself. One afternoon, in a small, quiet town they passed through, Sarah stood gazing at its still streets. It was nothing like the chaos she had endured, peaceful, untouched by fear. A place where people could live without secrets. But even here, she felt watched. Whether it was paranoia or something real, she couldn't say. She forced herself to look away. Emily was playing nearby, Coda by her side. Emily's laughter rang through the air, pure and untainted for a fleeting second. Sarah wanted to believe life could go back to normal. But there was no returning to what had been. Not after everything. You okay? Ethan's gentle voice broke into her thoughts. She turned to find him standing next to her, his eyes searching hers. Ethan had been watching her for days, picking up on the tiny cracks in her composure that she worked so hard to hide. Years on the force had trained him to recognize when someone was lying, even when that lie came in the form of silence. "I'm fine," Sarah said, her voice steady, though inside she was anything but. "Just tired, that's all." He didn't press her, he never did. Ethan respected her space, but she knew he was always keeping a quiet, watchful eye, ready to step in if danger came. "Come take a walk with me," he said after a pause, his tone low and thoughtful. "I need to clear my head, and I think you could use it too." She nodded, grateful for something to distract her. They set off down a quiet street, Coda trailing loyally at their heels. The town was small, its buildings weathered but well cared for, and there was a certain charm in the slow, deliberate rhythm of its people. For a moment, Sarah allowed herself to imagine this as her life, simple, safe, untouched by fear. But she knew it was only a dream, one that had vanished the moment she'd been framed. Her innocence hadn't just been stolen, it had been destroyed. Now she was left to rebuild her life, one fragile piece at a time. "I've been thinking," Ethan said as they walked, his voice calm but edged with resolve. "We can't run forever. Sooner or later, we're going to have to face him." Her heart lurched. She had been trying to avoid that truth, pretending they could just disappear and never have to confront the man who had torn their lives apart. But she knew he was right, the past was closing in, and it would catch them sooner or later. "I know," she murmured, barely above a whisper. I don't know if I'm ready." "You don't have to be," Ethan said firmly, though his voice carried warmth. "When the time comes, we'll face him together, you, me, Coda, and we'll make sure he answers for what he's done." Sarah swallowed hard, the weight of his words pressing against her chest. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe justice was possible. But the thought of failing and what that could mean for Emily sent a rush of fear through her that she could barely stand to imagine. They walked on in silence, the late afternoon breeze brushing over their skin. The sun was sinking lower, painting the horizon with streaks of orange and pink. For a fleeting moment, it felt peaceful even. Then Coda stopped abruptly. His ears shot up, tail rigid, every muscle tense. Sarah's pulse spiked. She knew. That look, it was the same one he'd had the day their flight began. The look that meant danger was close. "Ethan," she said quietly, urgency threading her voice. "Something's wrong." In an instant, Ethan's posture shifted. His hand went to the holster at his side, eyes narrowing as he scanned the street. Coda gave a low warning growl, his body coiled like a spring ready to snap. Sarah's stomach nodded. It was happening again. Someone was hunting them. "Stay close," Ethan whispered, his hand gripping her arm as he guided her toward a narrow alley. Kota moved ahead, nose to the ground, alert to every sound. They pressed into the shadows, breaths shallow. Sarah's heartbeat thundered in her ears. Who was it this time? Had he finally caught up to them? A car rolled slowly down the street, headlights slicing through the fading light. The engine cut off. Footsteps followed, slow, deliberate, drawing closer. Sarah pressed herself into the corner of the alley, praying they wouldn't be spotted. Kota was the first to brake. With a sudden burst, he bounded out, growl turning into a fierce bark as he charged toward the vehicle. The driver's door swung open, and the man who stepped out froze. "Who the hell are you?" the stranger demanded, eyes wide. Kota didn't hesitate. With one powerful leap, he knocked the man to the ground, holding him there with a strength born of pure instinct. "Ethan!" Sarah shouted, panic tightening her voice. Ethan was already moving, weapon drawn, but his eyes were locked on her. "Stay back!" The pinned man groaned, raising his hands in surrender. "I wasn't following you," he said quickly, his voice trembling. "I was trying to help." "Help?" Ethan's tone was sharp and suspicious. "Help with what?" "I'm not with him," the man blurted, his eyes wide with fear. "I've been tracking him. I know who he isn't. I know exactly where he's hiding." The slam of a car door echoed through the alley. Kota's growl rumbled low and dangerous, his fur bristling as he held the stranger pinned to the ground. Ethan's grip on the gun was steady, his aim fixed, his gaze locked on the man's face. "I told you, I'm not with him," the stranger insisted, his voice shaking. "I'm not one of them. I just want to help." Ethan studied him with narrowed eyes, suspicion etched into every line of his face. He didn't believe him, not yet, but there was something in the man's frantic glances, the restless flick of his eyes, that made Ethan pause. Could he be telling the truth? "What do you know?" Ethan asked, his voice cool and deliberate. The man's hands stayed raised, palms open in surrender. "I know who's behind all of this," he said quickly. "The one who set you up, Sarah. The one who made you a target. I know where he's been hiding, where he's laying low." Sarah froze, her thoughts spinning. This was it, the person who had destroyed her life and framed her for a crime she didn't commit, was finally within reach. The months of fear gripping her were now giving way to something else, an unshakable determination to end this nightmare. "Where?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "Where is he?" The man's eyes dropped to the ground, then flicked back to her. "He's holed up at a property in the hills, remote, almost impossible to find, but I know exactly where." Ethan's fingers tightened around his weapon, though his expression softened slightly. "And how do we know you're telling the truth?" "Because I want him dead as much as you do," the man said, swallowing hard. "He destroyed my life, too." Silence hung in the air. Then, slowly, Ethan lowered his gun, though every muscle in his body stayed tense. "We'll take you there. But if you're lying, I'm not lying," the man cut in firmly. "I swear, I'm here to help." "You want him gone? So do I." Sarah's pulse quickened. She didn't want to trust him, but this might be their only chance. She turned to Ethan, forcing her voice to stay steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "Let's go." The man led them out of the alley to an old, battered car parked nearby. Sarah didn't like the look of it, but there was no time to waste. Kota leaped into the back seat, his eyes sharp and watchful, as if sensing this was the final stretch. Emily climbed in beside him, her small hand resting on his fur, trusting him completely just as Sarah did. Kota wasn't just a dog. He was family, their unwavering protector. Ethan and the man whose name was Eric slid into the front seats. As the car pulled away from the quiet town, Sarah couldn't shake the eerie feeling of being watched. Maybe it was paranoia, maybe just the shadow of everything they'd been through. But every movement, every sound, every flicker of light made her skin prickle. She tried to push it from her mind. Emily's laughter, bright and innocent, filled the air as she played with Kota. For a moment, it almost felt like things could go back to normal. But deep down, Sarah knew there was no going back, not after all that had happened. That creeping Sense of danger never truly left her. You okay? Ethan's voice broke into her thoughts, gentle but probing. She turned to see him beside her, his eyes searching hers. He'd been watching her for days, picking up on the fear she tried so hard to hide. Years as a cop had taught him when silence was a lie. I'm fine, she said evenly, though inside she was anything but. Just tired. He didn't push, he never did. Ethan always gave her space, but Sarah knew he was ready to step in. If danger struck. Come for a walk, he said after a pause, his voice low and thoughtful. I need to clear my head. I think you do too. Grateful for the distraction, Sarah nodded. They walked down a quiet street with Kota padding at their heels. The small town had an easy rhythm, its old buildings well kept, its people unhurried. It was the kind of life she used to dream about, simple, safe. But that dream had vanished the moment she was framed. Her innocence hadn't just been stolen, it had been destroyed. Now she had to rebuild from nothing. I've been thinking, Ethan said quietly as they walked. We can't run forever. Sooner or later, we're going to have to face him. Sarah's heart skipped. She'd tried to avoid that truth, clinging to the hope they could escape without confronting the man who'd ruined everything, but deep down, she knew Ethan was right. The past would catch up with them. I know, she whispered. I just don't know if I'm ready. You don't have to be ready, he replied firmly, though his tone was warm. We'll face him together. And when the time comes, he'll pay for what he's done. She swallowed hard, the weight of his promise pressing against her chest. She wanted to believe justice would come, but what if they failed? What would happen to Emily, to Kota? She couldn't bear the thought of losing either of them. They walked on in silence, the late afternoon breeze brushing their skin. The sun dipped low, streaking the sky in shades of orange and pink. For a fleeting moment, the world felt peaceful. Then Kota's ears twitched, his body going still. Kota's tail went rigid, and he froze mid-step. Sarah's skin prickled, the hairs on her neck standing on end. She recognized that look in his eyes. It was the same one he'd had the day they first began running. It meant danger was close. Ethan, she whispered, urgency sharpening her tone. Something's wrong. In an instant, Ethan shifted into a defensive stance, his hand moving instinctively to the holstered gun at his side. He didn't speak, but Sarah saw his eyes sweep the street, narrowing as he searched for any threat. Kota gave a low warning growl, every muscle in his body taut, ready to strike. Sarah's stomach nodded cold. It was happening again, they were being hunted. Stay close, Ethan murmured, his hand closing around her arm as he steered her toward a narrow alley. Kota took the lead, nose low to the ground, his movements deliberate and watchful. They slipped into the shadows, holding their breath, listening. Sarah's pulse thudded in her ears, her thoughts racing. Who was after them this time? Had the man finally found them? The answer came quickly. A car rolled up, slow and deliberate, headlights slicing through the dim light. The engine cut off, and the sound of footsteps followed, measured, deliberate. Sarah pressed herself against the wall, barely breathing, praying they'd go unnoticed. Kota moved first. He shot from the alley like a bullet, his growl swelling into a deep, furious bark as he lunged toward the vehicle. The car door swung open, and the man standing there froze in shock. Who the hell are you? The stranger barked, his eyes wide. Kota didn't hesitate. With one powerful leap, he slammed into the man, knocking him to the ground and pinning him hard against the pavement. Ethan, Sarah cried, panic surging through her chest. Ethan was already charging forward, gun drawn and trained on the stranger. His voice was sharp, but his eyes flicked to Sarah. Stay back. The man groaned, hands raised high in surrender. I wasn't following you, he gasped, fear thick in his voice. I'm trying to help. Help. Ethan's tone was razor-edged. Help with what? I'm not with him, the man said, his gaze frantic. I've been tracking him. I know who he is and I know where he's hiding.